Welcome, everyone, to the Capsule 21 Weekly Podcast. This is Capsule 21 Weekly number 7, and it is titled The Final Episode. This is, in fact, the final episode of the Capsule 21 Weekly Podcast. And by that, I mean it is a final episode before we are reborn in a new form. And that form is as a real podcast. Previously, I was calling it a podcast. It was just a Twitter Spaces. Now it is going to be a real podcast. It will be on Anchor. I'm going to tweet this. You will see it, and there will be great content. And if you join this space, which means you're not listening to this right now, but for the next episode, you can listen to this and join, you can be on the podcast too. Now, it might seem a little bit odd for the first episode of the podcast to be called The Final Episode, but it gets at a very deep truth in the human condition, which is that there is no such thing as the beginning. There's always one step back. And I will tell you my favorite parable for this deep truth, which is the beginning of the Bible, which is definitely an interesting book to take a look at, because the first letter of the Bible, if anyone knows, if you want to just make a note in your head, the first letter of the Bible is Bet, which is the Hebrew letter basically for B. I don't know if it's exactly like that, but it's basically B. And the point there is that the first letter of the Bible is not A. And the reason for that may be, although what's the intent of the author? Like, who cares? But just nothing is at the beginning. The very beginning of in the beginning, there was nothing, and then God made it. Even that starts with B. There's no A. There's no who made God. There's no all of this other stuff. And so this is the final episode, and we are being born, and it is the new beginning. So welcome to the official first and final episode of the Capsule 21 Weekly Podcast. We are Capsule 21. We are an art collective consisting of me, Piv, and Dove. We are about timeless art. We're about the annotation of art. We're about on-chain art. And basically, we're about living life to the fullest. Every day, you should live like it is your last. That is a core tenet of Capsule 21, which means getting out there, creating art, talking about art, and spending time with people who you get along with in those capacities. And like on a personal level. But it's not just about the personal level. It's like being able to collaborate and stuff. So welcome to the pod. Dove and Pib, what's going on?
What's up? How's it going?
How's everyone doing? Fact
Can we get some claps?
Bible?
Can we get some claps in chat? In chat. This isn't Twitch. In the space. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's up, Piv? How are you?
I'm good. I'm busy in the museum right now, so there are already some youngs in the museum. Capsule 21 Museum.
Let's go.
Amazing. We have to link that from the site. This is an OnCyber museum. It's oncyber.io/timecapsule21 hyphenated. And basically you can see at once the sort of perversion of the digital art that we are creating, which is to say, if you're creating something timeless, you should not be thinking about a 21st century museum, which is a very specific context. But at the same time, seeing a piece of punk derivative on a wall is quite beautiful, especially if it is abstract. So we're going to do some shows in there. But for today, we have a pretty great agenda. So as always, we start with reader-suggested topics. There are no suggested topics, so we're going to pass that. But we've got Espresso here.
We got Espresso, yeah.
So do you have a topic? Espresso, welcome to the pod. Espresso, what's going on? If you want to say something, you're muted. If you don't want to say something, remain muted. So, reader topics.
Yo, how's it going?
Give it to us.
Hey, no particular comment. Just on my drive home, just figured I'd chime in where I can.
Hell yeah. Welcome, and thank you. And reader suggested topics are how we start. There's none today, but you can always tweet at me or raise your hand at any time. But we want to be sensitive to our readers, and that's my kind of jocular way of talking about our listeners. But we have a couple.
If no one has anything, I have a user submitted question that we haven't talked about.
Perfect.
Okay, so today, some blockchain archaeologists, self-proclaimed, say that they've found a new first NFT. Okay, they found the new first ever image hosted on chain.
Okay.
What do we think about these name? Do you know about the Namecoin stuff? What do we think about that? What is that?
I don't tell me what you think, and maybe it will, because I have no idea.
Yeah, Namecoin is like I don't even think I can do a good job explaining it. They're just like proto NFTs. Like they're very, very early. But you could like write something to the Ethereum blockchain, right? You could just like basically put your username. It was basically a way to like create a profile on the blockchain. But some people figured out that they could be kind of clever and insert an image into their username by putting like base64 code inside of the username field. If they just like put an image there instead, they could like hack an image to be on chain. So some people are like heralding these as the very first on chain NFT.
And so you can go to a contract and do a function, and out pops the base64 thing.
Yeah, I believe so. I can try to find the thread and then pin it to the top.
And you can own it. You can own. I mean, even if there's no image,
Espresso just did it. Hell yeah.
even if there's no image, it could still be the first. Does this get credit for being the first? Like, is there a Neil Dash thing? I really should know this, but okay. So this thread is basically saying Namecoin Explorer. So
yeah. They're calling it
right.
the first ever. Let me get the wording right. They're calling this the first on-chain image and file ever minted.
Right. Okay, so I'd have to look closer at this, but this actually segues into a really important thing that we're going to be talking about later. It's Agenda 3, but we can kind of get into a bit of it now. Is like, what does that mean, right? Like, clicking on that link, it seems like there is an explorer, like a block explorer, like an Etherscan type thing, and you are looking at a transaction receipt of some kind. The question is this something that someone put in the call data, which is what it's called? You submit data with your transaction, and then that got caught by a transaction explorer. Is this like in the receipt of a transaction only, or is it actually stored in the blockchain inside the internal state of a contract? And so this is very much related to the sort of one of the later topics that we're going to be getting into here, which is basically about the Michelin. Am I saying that right? The Michelin guide, essentially.
You can just say Michelin. It's actually American word. The Michelin Star Guide is named after Michelin Tire, who used to write reviews for restaurants along the highway system of America.
I know, but I was going to say, but do you know what the stars mean?
That's right. But in French, it's Michelin.
I told you.
Yeah, but it's an American company. It's Michelin.
Yeah, it's true. In origin. Yeah.
So 1 star means it's worth a stop. 2 stars means it's worth a detour, and 3 stars, I forget, it's something like you should make a special trip out of it, basically. So, if a restaurant says we got a Michelin star, it's 1 star, that means, oh, great, you're worth a stop. But I think there's been star deflation. But I just put up this this tweet now, which is an iconic tweet from last year that maybe we're going to update today, and we might as well just get into this now, actually, which is, what does on-chain mean? Like, as always, with words that are colloquial but refer to underlying, like, deeply technical concepts, it's like it's not always clear that 2 people are talking about the same thing. And so, what is on-chain NFT? What is on-chain art? Well, for one thing, an NFT is something where it has an ID and an owner, and that's stored on-chain so that OpenSea can know who owns something. But then when we say on-chain, we're really referring to the fact that kind of the art or other metadata should be on-chain or chain adjacent in some way, and then that should be good because nerds like I am like it, and also it has other nice qualities such as data longevity and data composability and these kinds of things. And so if we look at the tweet, if anyone wants to just look at this tweet up here, and I can say it for the pod, basically this tweet is giving you the stars. So it says X, okay, is the first thing, which is not really stars. It's like the absent of all stars. It says IPFS, Arweave, or content hash. Now, content hash really just means IPFS, so just ignore that. So IPFS or Arweave, that's 0 stars. 1 star, data stored via call data. And so this is what I'm suspecting this Namecoin thing might be about, but I might be wrong. And call data is basically the data that is in your transaction when you submit it to a contract. So for example, if you are saying, hey, I want to mint an NFT, the call data might be like the number 1, because that's like you want to mint 1 NFT. The call data would be 10. And so what if you put some really interesting thing in this call data and submit that to the contract? Well, even if the contract does nothing with that, the call data itself, even if the transaction fails, the call data itself will be preserved in a transaction receipt by Ethereum nodes and available on Etherscan. So, this is the lowest form because this is not actually on chain. In other words, the blockchain itself does not store this information, the call data of a request by default. It is picked up only by people who are looking at the blockchain. So this is kind of this meta question. Is it available to the blockchain itself, i.e. to other contracts within transactions, or is it available merely to people who are watching the blockchain, from the sidelines and not contributing anything whatsoever, but maybe doing so. So Etherscan is someone watching it. Etherscan is a centralized website, and if Etherscan went away, then we'd have a problem because we need someone else to watch it. And so it turns out that at least right now, that every Ethereum node, if they are a real node, which means if Ethereum is working, every Ethereum node is something that you can turn to watch, and you can even watch the past from it. And so if Etherscan went away, someone else could create a new centralized service that watched the blockchain. And in doing so, we would not lose anything. So there's a certain on-chainness here, but there are a couple of problems with this approach. So one approach is it is not available on the chain to contracts. So if a contract, for example, wants to say, hey, this mint is free to someone who owns this other NFT, the contract has to be able to check who owns this other NFT. And likewise, for example, if the contract wanted to say, hey, like I want to, do something with the image of this other contract, like I wanted to, take the SVG of, you could say WIDEs. If you want to take the SVG of a punk and you want to stretch it out, that is only possible if the punk is available on chain. So these are the advantages. But there's even more kind of visceral advantage here, which is that the blockchain is not something, it's a chain, right? And the chain means that when you break the chain, everything goes away. And so you can't break the chain. So the blockchain does not work unless every chain link is there. And so if you put something on the blockchain, you can be very confident that the thing you put on there is going to be there in a year because everyone after you has to include it. This is not the case for transaction receipts. And in fact, there is a proposal out there called EIP 4444, which in my opinion should be called 6666 because it's questionable in my opinion. EIP 4444 basically is saying we are going to, thank you, I got one emoji there for that one. Please put emojis if you really want to. It only helps the algorithm, makes everything better, but it's not a big deal. If this EIP goes through, which I think is unlikely, then nodes will no longer, they're going to change the rules. Nodes no longer will be forced to carry all of this historical stuff. So all of the call data stuff could be lost. And the reason is that it is not part of the blockchain, and so they can change the rule. So the rule today is you have to have it, but they can change that rule. The rule today is also that the blockchain has to be unbroken, but they cannot change that rule without messing everything up. So you have this future-proofness of on-chain. And so I want to just say, and I'll take that question, Xerox Chuck, who is an emoji reactor. I want to now just sort of jump into before I go up the chain, I want to talk about another call data issue. And that is this Fair XYZ thing. Okay, so Fair XYZ, which I think is pretty cool, at Fair XYZ, they're in my thread on this subject, which, excuse me, which I will pin now. Fair XYZ basically offers this thing where they'll say, okay, we will mint you an NFT that says you minted this other NFT, which is actually pretty cool, I think, because, what is an NFT? Yes, it's a picture, but really, as we always say, it's about the store, backstory, and all this kind of interesting stuff. And so who minted an NFT is actually pretty interesting. Like, if someone, claimed the very first CryptoPunk or, minted the very first, Yunk or sold the very first Yunk for that matter. Someone was talking about that. That's pretty interesting. And why not memorialize it on the blockchain with another NFT? But it turns out there's a big problem here because the minter, i.e. the facts surrounding the minting of an NFT, is 1 star Michelin. Okay, it is not on chain. It is only available to observers of the blockchain. It's the receipt. When you mint something, you get the thing you minted, and that's an on-chain thing. But the receipt saying I minted it on this date, and here's how much it costs, and all that kind of stuff, that is not on-chain. And so it turns out there is no way to, in a on-chain way, know that you minted something, and then therefore there is no way in an on-chain way to give you a new NFT based on your minting of something. So you know how there's like an allow list that says you have to own a Yunk to mint a Cyberpunk. There's no way to say you have to have minted a Yunk to mint a Cyberpunk. And so the question is, how are they actually doing this? But to pause here for a moment, this is the level 1 Michelin star that I think is going on with the Namecoin thing that brings up some interesting fair XYZ things and that gets at some big questions about what the blockchain future is going to be with EIP 4444. What's up, y'all? Chuck, you were going to say something, or did I answer it?
Probably. How you going? Question is EIP 4444 in an attempt to reduce the amount of space that a node needs to
Yes.
function?
Yes, it is. It is making the very reasonable claim that having the entire history and life story of every little detail for every single node makes it harder to be a node. And when it's harder to be a node, that has other negative qualities like less decentralization and all kinds of other things. So,
So
it's kind of
does culling the blockchain, though, doesn't it? Culling transactions also does
right,
it.
which
And
is why
things like on-chain data when you remove stuff from your hard drive, what do you take out first? Stuff that takes more room.
I think yes, it also presents these other problems with decentralization, which means it's harder to get for normal people to get a hold on this, kind of thing. I don't think it'll actually happen, but the real issue, I think, and it's not going to happen for a while, even if it does, but the real issue, I think, for anyone who's, deeply serious about the on-chain thing, which whatever, but it's, anything that can happen will happen, right? Like that is guaranteed. I think we can all agree in the past period of time in humanity, anything that can happen will happen. And you can't break the blockchain. If you remove something from the blockchain, that ends Ethereum, which might also happen. But you can't remove something from the chain and still have Ethereum. But you can delete all of this history and still have Ethereum. And so it is going to happen. And so that's why if you're planning to live long enough to see that, you should at least be entertaining these questions surrounding how to, how and whether to try to mitigate this in your work, and whether it's practically relevant or philosophically relevant or anything like that. But that's the 1 star. That's why it's 1 star, basically, and it's not composable too.
I think the beauty of it is that if you really did care about it, you would take the blockchain and actually, and I'm sure it's already been done, to actually download it in its entirety. If this does go through, if 4444 does go through, then it's time for archival nodes and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge then is, if you do download or someone else does download, it's like, how do you know you got it? How do you know you didn't make a mistake or someone didn't tamper with it? There are services like, IPFS where, and this is the content hash thing from before, where you can have some, guarantee of persistence, where if you show me the thing later, I can verify that it was the thing it was before, that no one tampered with it. You have something like but you have to pay for IPFS. You have something like Arweave, which is supposed to be free, but not free, but supposed to be one-time payment, but that has, censorship stuff that could be an issue here. So, there's really no easy answer. But the important thing for us is just to get it, basically. But, to be fair, this is the original, so it should be 3 stars in terms of originality. So the original Bitcoin block, right, had the famous on-chain art in it, which was the chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. Basically, Satoshi put this in there. No one knows why, but maybe it's a commentary on fractional reserve banking, or maybe it's a to make sure that, say, well, it couldn't have happened before X date, like when you hold up a newspaper to prove it was the date. But there's text in the first Bitcoin block, and that, Bitcoin has no concept of on-chain because there's no internal state of the thing. It's not a computer, but the very first thing ever had this artwork in it, which is this like inscrutable sentence. And so I would say maybe that is the first NFT, the very first Bitcoin thing ever, Dub. So I think you're wrong, actually.
I never claimed to be right. I don't know anything about this Namecoin business.
There was a guy on a chair space named Benton, and he was talking about Namecoin and some of the controversies around it. If I can find his Twitter profile and ask him about maybe to write something out on it, I'll send it through.
Something that I want to express, because it's relevant to this conversation, and especially the Namecoin stuff, is that it matters much less than everyone thinks. What was the first of something? Like, I don't think that it's actually that important to be the first NFT or to be like the first on-chain NFT. Like, I think these are kind of useless metrics that people are just like searching for. No one is going around being like, oh, like, was this the first acrylic painting? Was this the first ever, X, Y, or Z medium for art? And it's just it's kind of fascinating. Like, it's an interesting little historical touchstone. But how relevant it is, I don't know if it really matters.
But I thought Yunks was the first NFT SVG punk derivative to use FE turbulence. That's what we always say. Is this?
That is true. That's true.
Yes, we're getting some applause here. No, but I fundamentally agree with you, and I think it's actually not a well-formed kind of even comment or question. If you look at like the history of the world, in other words, like the most common like battleground for these so-called priority claims is the history of science, basically, because everyone's discovering stuff, and it's like, oh, like actually Edison didn't discover anything, but Tesla did it all, or Alexander Graham Bell didn't discover the telephone. And there's some non-joke things here about who actually gets credit for stuff and what groups of people don't, and all this kind of thing. So it's a legit sort of social question. But in terms of the actual sort of epistemological or philosophical question, it really is impossible, because the thing that you are discovering and the discovery of that thing and knowing what that thing is are all. So as an example, the classic example of this is in the history of chemistry and the question, who discovered oxygen? Okay, so who discovered it? Who named it? And so what do you want to say about this question? You could say, hey, the person who discovered oxygen is the first chemist who had oxygen in a bottle somewhere. And that pretty obviously doesn't make sense, because maybe it was just a total accident. They didn't know what it was. And then, the person who actually did discover it in terms of like putting a name on it is this guy Priestley. And what he called it was not oxygen, but dephlogisticated air, which is a mouthful that is a term that exists. I won't get into, but it's a term that only makes sense in the context of the outmoded scientific theory that he was using at the time. And that scientific theory was one that basically, just had no concept of oxygen as a separate entity that was like involved in burning something, but it was rather just a form of air, basically, like a different type of like inner, just out there kind of thing. Not a great explanation, but the point is Lavoisier came along and is a chemist, French guy, Michelin style, and he basically reproduced all of Priestley's experiments, did the exact same experiments, got the exact same results, but talked about it in a different way, saw it differently, interpreted it differently, and he gets the credit, and it's called oxygen today. And so the point being is, as you look backwards in these cases, there's no way to actually say who did the thing first, because did they even know what they were doing? And so when it comes to the first NFT, it's the same thing for me. It's like the reason CryptoPunks were the first NFT is because they were the first ones to know what they were doing, to know what an NFT was going to be culturally and all this kind of stuff. Now, ENS maybe too, but if you look at the landscape today and what an NFT is and where it's going, and you look at the first people to, discover that, I really believe it's CryptoPunks. But it's a ridiculous question, because there is no a real answer. And yet I love saying I'm the first of things. I wonder why that is, because you kind of want to try to be the. So reset the room for a second. Okay, this is the first episode of the Capital 21 weekly podcast. It is called The Final Episode, which is a nod to endings and beginnings and how you're never starting at the beginning. Bunch of different topics of conversation. Right now we are talking about the tiers, the Michelin star guide to on-chain art, and we are talking about things that seem like they're on-chain but aren't. And in particular, we're talking about this new mint by this Twitter name @FairXYZ that is claiming to be able to mint you an NFT that commemorates your minting of a different NFT. And my perspective on this is that this is not possible to do, and they are actually doing a different thing. And I want to say now what that is and how they do that. But what do you think? What do you think, Dov? Do you believe me?
I gotta be honest, I just missed what you said because I'm trying to answer Nuno's questions about the vault and chat at the same time.
Just what? Yeah, okay, I'm getting added here. Oh my god. This is insane. This is about the cyberfunks. Yeah, it's important to it's important to vault. So vault, another topic we could get in today. I've been these are all my obsessions, but
So sorry, can you ask me the question again? I didn't mean to derail.
okay, so yeah, so the question is basically, and who was it in chat who was doubting me? I forget, someone in here in the chat was doubting me. The question is, Fair XYZ. You can go to their site.
Yeah.
You can mint a 3D picture that is a picture of another NFT and has a thing on it that says, you minted this other NFT, congratulations. And so is this cool? And also, is this possible? And if it's not possible, what are they actually doing?
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Fair XYZ seems like a scam to me. And I'm very surprised that they've been officially endorsed and partnered with OpenSea, because I don't understand what service they are even claiming to provide that costs money. Why would I pay for their token? I'm at a complete loss for that simple question.
Right. Yes. I mean, I think it is. Well, I don't even know if they're asking you to pay for something. I think. Oh, it's a no-code platform type thing. Okay, so I think it's like a manifold type thing, I think. But then the minter.fair.xyz is the thing we're talking about, which the way you pay for it is you follow them on Twitter, which is sort of funny. But it's a very cool image. If you go to this right now, minter.fair.xyz, I will give it up. Basically, it is like a collectible card where the image of the thing you minted is encased in a translucent thing, and there's a thing on the top that basically says, okay, it's this number on this date, you minted it, there's a check mark on it. And so I think it's pretty cool, but it's not possible. And so what is the thing that's actually kind of going on here? And maybe it's also good, or maybe it's bad. The reason why it's not possible is because in the general case, and even in really the specific case, but in the general case, you cannot know who minted something, because that data, i.e. who initiated the transaction that caused the mint to happen, is not available on chain. That data is only available in the transaction receipt. So when a mint happens, there is an on-chain action called a mint, which transfers a token from the null address to the recipient of that mint. But the person calling that is not a parameter in that. Typically, the person calling that is usually in the mint contract validated to make sure the person calling that is, on the whitelist or the allow list, or the person calling that is sending enough money. But typically, the person calling that isn't stored on chain. And when you see someone in a transaction receipt minting something, that's because someone observed this transaction and wrote it down and showed it to you. And that person is probably Etherscan. So how do you do something like this? So this is possible because of...
Tell me why it's possible, sir.
Yes. Okay, so this is possible and powered through basically asking the user to submit the information about what they minted. And so that on its own won't work, right? Because any user can submit anything and say, I minted this. So the question is, how do you validate the thing that the user submits is real? And so this kind of gets at this question and this overall technique that we've talked about some different things, but this is a technique that is known as signatures. And the way a signature works in Ethereum is basically the same way it does when you are writing a letter, where you, this was something that was from the old times. Actually, Dove recently did this, so Dove knows. So if you're writing a letter or a postcard, at the bottom you sign your name, then that basically means I said this stuff. So later in court, when the cross-examining attorney is saying, like, are these your words? And then you could say, well, I don't remember saying them. And the attorney would then say, but this is your signature, is it not? And you'd have to say, it is my signature. I'm trapped. So signature, colloquially speaking, is a way of proving that the thing that you're looking at, this message, was actually written by and said by this other person. And so the way this works, basically, on a high level, is that when you submit the information to mint this minter token, you are saying, this other person says that I minted this, basically. And when you look up who that other person is, it's basically a random address, essentially. So, by person, you don't sign a letter. You are an Ethereum address, and you can do some signing in a more crypto way or whatever. So basically, a cryptographic Ethereum signature is a way of saying this address endorsed this message. This address said this. And so when you actually look this up on this contract, you basically find a random address. You can look it up on Etherscan. And when you are minting one of these minter tokens, what you are saying is, this address says that I minted this other NFT, and you're kind of hoping that that is correct, which is not the same thing as actually minting it, because there's a trust thing there, but it's basically as good as you can get. And this is kind of like the signature-based technique. So this is how this works.
So, right, it's why does fair.xyz's approval or like verification of something like hold more weight than Etherscan's? Are they even claiming that it does, or are they just saying, like, we're going to do it in a way that's like pretty and nice to look at, and Etherscan only does it in a way that's like kind of obtuse and nerdy?
Well, you need someone to attest to the validity of the fact that you minted it, and that has to be an Ethereum address with a private key. And so Etherscan, it would be really cool if Etherscan had a service that said, hey, we will sign messages that said you minted something, but that would be something they really have to offer in a very specific way. There'd have to be an Ethereum address, not a contract, although there's some stuff there, an Ethereum address that has a private key that is used to sign these things. So they hopefully are looking at Etherscan and then signing messages on that basis, or they're looking at their own thing. But you, as the minter, can't go directly to Etherscan, because Etherscan does not have this service where they are, handing out these signatures that attest to the fact that you minted things.
Right.
Pretty cool service, though.
Will, what do you think about this?
I think what he said totally makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I was basically gonna say you need like a private key to attest, and maybe like a node, and then you would want to like be careful about like uncle blocks or like whatever, all that shit where like weird shit happens on the chain. I don't know. I'm not super informed on all that. I just know you need to like wait a couple blocks, like 7 or more, to like be certain of a result. And yeah, it would basically be like an off-chain thingy,
right,
with like a private key.
Let me ask another question. I don't know if the guy is in here who is talking about fair.xyz and was interested in it. I don't remember what his name was, but does anyone care? Who like, why does it matter who was the person who minted something? This is something that I was talking about on Twitter, I think last night, is that, the computer truth is not more real than the truth. You know what I mean? Like, just because the computer says something is true doesn't make it hold more weight or like make it more valuable than what is like a commonly held truth. So the fact that we're putting so much like weight into the system and being like, whoa, like it's real, like this is amazing. I can have the Ethereum blockchain confirm that I was the first person to mint this NFT. But like, why do we actually care about that? And does it matter who minted something?
Well, I mean, I think, well, I mean, it depends what you mean by care. Like, I'm not like a care lord. I'm not care pilled, if that's what you mean, sitting around, every
Care Bears.
I'm not, carehead, but I I mean, I think Piv has mentioned this before to me. Like, if you are thinking about the context behind an NFT, the people who owned it, it's a pretty interesting question. Like, Pauly just put out that Funk Alien for sale. That alien's more valuable to me if I had the money to buy it, based on the fact that it was like had this interesting, Pauly bought it for low and then sold it for high and then bought it for also kind of high but less high and then maybe selling it again. Like, it's an interesting thing. Now, I'm not care pill, but anyway, Piv, you've talked about this in a non-care pill way.
Yeah, I think that this was indeed basically what I said, that the history is indeed also important. I sometimes also wonder if you have two floor NFTs of something, but one of them was sold for a very high price 6 months ago and the other one not. Which one do you want to buy? Do you have a preference for one of them? If they're basically the same. And is it important?
I think, knowing the price, I think, is also a very interesting thing. Like, if you were to be able to say, hey, I mean, this is sold the bottom or whatever.
But they're the same prices. They're the same price, but one was 6 months ago bought for much more, for 10 times more, and the other one was never bought.
Right. I think it'd be the question of, do you want to buy the thing Hemba sold the bottom of, or the equivalent thing that someone sold the top of? And I think I'm basic, so I would prefer the higher price thing in the past, because I think other people are basic too. But the story in the long term, I think is really a fascinating story. I mean, let me put it this way: we are all just looking at the blockchain. None of us are on chain, so we don't actually have direct access to any of this stuff. We are looking at it, and so we're watching this whole thing unfold, and that to me is the interesting part, is like the human dynamic here. Now, I'm not trying to say it's like we're going to be it's the most interesting thing ever, but I think the fact that you can understand the history, I think it's cool. But I also think, I know you're pressing on this, Dov, and like I like the idea of skepticism, but I know when you are talking on a more colloquial or folk level, you are interested in this. Last night, again, referring to the unsanctioned space that happened last night. Last night, I broke the news that there is a CryptoFunk that is not viewable, let alone sellable, on OpenSea. And the reason for that is that someone who owns the quote-unquote corresponding, which is not the correct word here because it's conceptual art, not like the image being flipped or whatever, but the person who owns the corresponding punk, the CryptoPunk, which is an off-chain fact, who I guess the fact that they own it is on-chain, but the way they came into it and what happened there's some on-chain things, but the really off-chain thing is they sent an email to not Larva Lab saying take it down, and then it was taken off of a Web2 marketplace. But that's interesting, that is really interesting, even though it is a even though it's not about where the punk token looks. Spotty Wi-Fi. Dub, you remember?
Yeah, I guess my point is that if you want to say that funk is more valuable because in the past it was DMCA'd and it wasn't on OpenSea, this is a hypothetical future where it's back on OpenSea. If you want to say that it's more valuable because of its history, I don't need blockchain verification that at one point it was DMCA'd in order to be more interested in it. If I have, one trusted community member, or better, 5 or 10 trusted community members who all have this shared memory and history that this token has this interesting thing that happened to it, and I can go and look on Twitter screenshots, and I can go and look on Discord messages, and I see that, oh yeah, this is that seems to be what happened. I see a screenshot, I see people talking about it. I don't know that I need blockchain verification for that to be interesting or worthy of like greater collector status. Does that make sense? I guess
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
flooding blockchain technology as a whole right now.
I think you want some substantiation, and the question is how far down can you go, before the chain comes into play. And yeah, like someone can do the meme thing, like Ryder Rips, right? Created maybe the deal with the glasses meme. So people have been doing meme archaeology, using the
But
mechanisms you
is it
described.
He didn't create that, by the way.
like
I
this?
want
Is it true? Yeah, indeed. Some people say he did, but he probably didn't.
he didn't. I'm
So
going to say he didn't.
yeah, I also think he didn't. But that's just you, and that's only 4 years ago or so. So how
Right.
much can you trust community members on which time frame? Which time frame?
Right. I mean, people say like, oh, like this collection with this art was on there first, and therefore, like, this is my art and no one else's art. Even that doesn't really make sense because there's lots of artists who don't mint things to the blockchain. So you could just put somebody else's work and mint it and say that it's yours, and you can check the blockchain, and no one put this image on the blockchain before I did. So okay, but that doesn't mean that you created the image. It doesn't mean that you have any rights to it. You're not the author, and that's interesting as well, because I think that's one of the bigger like use cases and sell points for blockchain tech that people kind of will use to evangelize Ethereum and blockchains in general. But I don't think it's a very good point. What's up, Daba?
Yeah, but I agree that FUDing. I'll just say one thing and then Daba, because the FUDing thing. It's like I think it's maybe worth flipping this a little bit and saying, well, okay, fine, you can't prove, that you were the first to come up with the idea, but given two transactions, and this is not a trivial thing at all, given two transactions, both people posting the same thing, you can tell who came first, right? And that is, I think, pretty cool and literally not possible with any other technology, right? Like literally not possible. How about this? You can tell when one of them happened. You can get a timestamp. Literally not possible with any other technology. So it's like, I definitely think copy pasting and everything, and we have a museum, in fact, of copy pasting. But like, if you really kind of try to get down to the core level of how you get things like timestamps in the Web 2 world, and you really start to say, okay, well, let's just fall back on whatever Discord's doing lately. It's like, well, maybe you can't trust those folks either to be able to tell you about what came first or what didn't. So I'm block pilled. Daobao, what up? Daobao.
Hello. Yes. Sorry, I thought I didn't know I was muted. I thought I had unmuted. So I pinned something to the top of the space about paintings that are hiding in plain sight. And this is in reference to an Arshil Gorky painting that was believed lost in a fire. And I put this up there kind of as a kind of a playful foil of Dovetail's point of view. That the one conceptual way that you can think about this timestamp and the NFT contract as being a significant or even more important aspect of the art is if you start to think of the NFT as part of the art, as like a piece of the art rather than just a certificate of authentication, right? So this painting is famous because as far as I remember the story, Gorky had gone to some farm in Virginia. He had painted this, and there were photos of it, or there was a photo of it, and then there was famously this fire in the Virginia farm or barn where he was painting. And for many, many years, they thought, well, maybe this is one of the paintings that had been lost in the fire. And then one day, there was an owner of a Gorky painting who said, I'm having a problem with this canvas. It seems to be peeling, or it doesn't fit right on the frame. And so this guy took the painting to a restorer and said, can you help me with this? Or he asked the guy to come to the house or whatever. And when the restorer looked at it, he was like, something is very weird about the way this painting is framed. He said, can we take this to an x-ray, or we do some spectrometry, or they did some kind of thing with it. It turns out that the painting that was believed lost was being used as the background of a painting, just because that's what artists would do. They would try to save money. So they would just flip around a canvas and or attach something to the back of another canvas and then just use it as a new space to paint on. I don't know that I'm just putting this out there off the top of my head. I don't know that there's something out there in sort of NFT land that is synonymous with this. But in some cases, I think that the NFT, like in Me, I think that it is true that the NFT is a functional part of the art and it is the art. So I think in some cases, it really does matter what this signature says or what this stamp of authority says, because it's indeed a artifact itself and inextricable from the art. Just in the way that a painting being used as the back of another painting is both part of the art and also a record of the history of that art.
Right, sure, but in Mimi's case, right, like that has nothing to do with there's no transaction history, which I think is what I'm really getting at, and I'm kind of fudding the need for preservation of historical information being on the blockchain. I think you can just use Ethereum as a big computing machine and not necessarily as a storage machine,
Right.
especially not as a record keeping machine. I think that you don't. I don't know. There's like use cases for it, but I think people in like the NFT space kind of take it to the nth degree and try to ascribe meaning to things that don't really have as much meaning as we would like to think. Because I think the people who are like finding these very old, it was an image from 2012 on a name coin. Like I think that's mostly like a bag move. Like they're not doing that out of genuine interest. I think that they're doing it so that they can collect something that's like very valuable. Maybe that's like a stubborn way of thinking about it, or like a jaded way of thinking about it. But that's the way it seems to me. And who an NFT belonged to at one point. People kind of like to make memes like, oh, like I got this one from this person in January. Like, oh, this is from when Franklin was like a mod in the Funks Discord, and that's like a crazy history. I think that's cool. Like, I agree that those should be worth more, but I don't need the blockchain to like prove that to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, then how do you prove it?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's, I mean, I think Middlemarch is, I'm just sort of trying to weigh both sides of this. I feel like in some cases, like there is this idea. I think what Middlemarch is saying is that there is this idea of doubt with sort of non-computer verified.
Sure, but that's the way
right?
we've worked for the last, thousands of years.
I agree. So my point has been before. I think you've probably heard me say this. That some of the delight of art is the whole mystery of whether or not something is true or not.
Yeah, it's the I'm folklore.
Yeah,
I think that the generally understood truth is much more important than the actual veritable truth of time and space and history. Like what people think happened is the truth. But
that's pretty question begging though, because when people, so if it's a Discord screenshot, that's what people think. That's a screenshot.
Yes.
It's like people think also is influenced by technology. The way people interact with the world now versus in true folk times.
So, I'll give you an example though.
I'll give you an example. I'm gonna break. We have Mad Yak and Chunk who've been sitting here with their hands up. I would like to hear them.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm going to chime in real quick. It looks like Fair XYZ is done with Tropo. So do we tag them and see if they come chat?
Yes. How do I do that? You're saying like a DM?
Maybe you could DM or just I'll tag them in the tweet below the spaces.
I DM them and I will do the other thing. Good call.
Yeah, I've been patiently kind of watching them to see if maybe they were going to run an hour or so, because I'd love to hear their point of view.
For sure. Chuck, Chunk, what do you got?
Yo. I've got 3 things to say, and by the time you answer the first one, I'll probably forget the other 2. So I'll say all 3 at the same time. Then we can disassemble it. Because I forget things all the time. So the first one is about hiding stuff in plain sight. You can use steganography for things that are off-chain. And for on-chain stuff, you could probably do it with, and I think I've DM'd you about it before, but it's about using group definitions inside SVGs. You can hide stuff inside SVGs and have that on-chain. Obviously it costs gas, but it's a thing. And I forgot the third thing. Fuck. No, I got it. Chia, the Chia blockchain is going to come out with something called the data layer. And the data layer is on-chain storage.
I love it.
anything.
I love it. Let me just, first of all, just welcome, though, because Matt Madiak suggestion. I pinged Fair. Fair is here. Welcome, Fair. We've been having a little bit of wide ranger on, what is on-chain and how do signatures work. And, it was sort of spurred on by your project, which I saw today and thought was very, very cool in terms of the visual aspect, and something that I at least think is a really cool thing to have. We've been talking about. It doesn't matter who minted something, but I believe it does. And not only would I like to get credit for something that I minted, but maybe something else that I want to buy. If I looked at this token and saw, hey, this other person minted it, maybe it'd be more valuable because that person's famous. And so, the question that we were kind of talking about is, how is this information conveyed and verified, conveyed to the blockchain and verified in order to mint you this? How do I know that when I see one of these minted tokens that the person who holds it, or rather the person who's on it, I guess it's soulbound, the person who's on it, the person who's hold it, how do I know they actually minted it? And what we were talking about, and I'm curious on your perspective on this, is that, the information about who minted what is not an on-chain concept. So it's impossible for the contract that is minting the minted tokens to, at the time one of these mints is being verified, check to see who minted the token in question and mint the mint commemoration token only to the person who did that. There has to be an external source of truth, because this is only available in events and transaction receipts and this kind of thing. And so really what there has to be is basically, someone else who's not on the blockchain, who's not involved in this transaction, who vouches for the fact that you minted it, and gets that information from an API and does whatever. And then in this case, it's an address in the contract, which seems like it has done some things, but is essentially, from a user standpoint, kind of a random address. And so the question is, this is a token that's sort of commemorating the fact that you minted something, but really, I think what it's doing is commemorating the fact that this address, that's kind of this random address, thinks that you minted something. And it's a great website, and in life you don't get perfect everything, but is that a lower standard of verification than you might want? So curious for your thoughts on this, if I'm missing something.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks so much for welcoming me up to the space. I'm super excited to be here. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a lovely evening. So my name's Zach. I'm one of the co-founders here at Fair XYZ. And yeah, it's awesome to be on the spaces. So I think you raise a great point. The reality is that, as you know, and as you correctly mentioned, there are things that you simply cannot verify, from within a smart contract in itself, right? So smart contracts can't listen to events, they can't read transaction receipts. So it is virtually impossible, unless you bring in some form of social validation, which still would not be on chain, to have this cryptographically proven within the smart contract in itself at the time of minting. So of course, we rely on essentially APIs, or in our case, we were pretty much listen to events on the blockchain and then using that as the way of providing people with their minted tokens. But I think one of the things that we understand, and one of the things that we want to start providing for users as experiences, is there are things that due to the limitations in smart contracts and the way that EVM is currently built, you do have to bridge that gap, right? And I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but there are certain consumer experiences which we'd love to be able to provide in the most seamless manner possible, and sometimes that does involve a small degree of compromise. So for example, let's assume that tomorrow a contract wants to allow list every single person that ever minted a Yuga Labs NFT, right? Any kind of Yuga Labs ecosystem NFT. today you can't really do that, well, today and in the future, you can't really do that from the smart contract in itself, right? You can't check someone's minter status by calling any function on the, for example, Bored Ape smart contract. So you'd essentially be relying on an API, which would then, for example, feed into a signature, and then that would in turn, be used to verify that that user was the person that minted, and then you provide them with that experience. The way that we thought about it is, okay, well, the users are going to have to do that anyway. So how do we bridge that gap so that people can make native calls within their smart contract to understand that a given user minted a given NFT from a smart contract in the past? So it's this kind of weird compromise between, we like we love decentralization, we love on-chain data, we love staying true to on-chain data, but there are experiences that people still need. So how do we provide that to them in the most seamless manner? And that was kind of the driver behind the Minter token itself. I think, aside from that, it's also a massive community celebration, right? I think what we've seen over the last 24 hours has been super optimistic and like very positive sentiment around people that are having kind of a reunion, almost like reminiscing that first moment of minting a certain NFT, and the beauty of having initially entered a community. So you've got people that minted Doodles, Bored Apes, Cool Cats, and all sorts of other collections that aren't necessarily holders today, but still want to be celebrated for being the kind of early believers in that community.
Hell yeah, thank you. I think that's very well put, and I 100% agree. And I'm definitely, I'm 100% on board with the concept. And I think, yeah, it's like welcome to planet Earth, right? You can only do what you can do, and it's great actually that people have developed these standards surrounding signatures that actually allow them to be this good for things that you can't do on chain. You mentioned the allow list, thing. There was this old version of how people used to do this, right? This Merkle tree thing, which I kind of understand, but don't understand that well. But basically, the signature-based approach is just super, super, super flexible to be able to convey, hey, here is a here's a short way of saying that this piece of data is vouched for, and sorry, okay, so
I can hop in here if you need a second to
yeah,
look at
just
something.
hop in.
Okay. Well, first of all, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming to our space. I think I'm a fudder for the Minter token. I think that they're cool. I think that it's neat to have something like that, especially if it's at no cost to the claimant. I think that's pretty interesting. When I was reading about this, something that struck me was that it says that the Minter token cryptographically proves that a wallet owner minted an NFT. And I'm curious about using the term cryptographically proven, if we've just talked about, it's not technically possible to prove someone was the minter, even though it's a pretty close solution. That's interesting. I liked what you said about, what utility it could have and allowing you to token gate people who are minters. Like, I think that's kind of a fascinating use case. I think it's kind of a fascinating use case for just like I don't know, it's like a cool way to like look at someone's wallet and see, oh, they look at all these things that they minted, instead of having to go on Etherscan or go on OpenSea or go on any other place that like records these histories and then look at it. So, am I correct in saying that it doesn't do anything? It doesn't do anything new. It just does it in a new way. It's a new way of showing people this thing that's already kind of publicly available information. So I'm going to be all over the place there, but that's
I think those are great points. First of all, look, I completely appreciate and really value the fact that there can be polarized opinions about the Minter token in itself. I think in order to pursue certain degrees of innovation, you have to push certain boundaries, which sometimes does involve compromise. I completely agree with you that the moment that you move things from being purely on chain, then it's not exactly the most comfortable experience for every single user, and I completely hear that. That's for sure a fact. I mean, when we say cryptographically improve, I guess like to clarify that, when people are minting Minter tokens, as of now, we haven't seen any kind of breach of the data integrity to what people are minting, right? And we constantly monitor that. So right now, if you make a smart contract call into the Minter token smart contract to check whether a certain holder minted a certain NFT, that as of now still remains true. That person was the person that minted that specific token. Of course, the smart contract in itself is also signature gated, meaning that when someone's trying to mint, they can't go and amend the inputs into the transaction once the transaction is about to go ahead. So as of now, and hopefully forever into the future, when someone makes a smart contract call into the Minter tokens contract, then they are getting verifiable proof of the fact that someone did mint a certain NFT. But that being said, I do hear your point, and I think it's completely valid. I think it's a very valuable point. Within FairXYZ, just to let you know, as a company, we're very much focused on keeping everything completely on-chain and decentralized. So, if you launch, so to give people a bit more context about FairXYZ as a platform, we're essentially an NFT no-code solution that enables creators to launch NFT collections completely end-to-end, and also provides collectors with a pretty cool minting experience. But we can, talk about that maybe in another spaces at another point. And everything that we do within the within the platform in itself is actually fully decentralized, right? So if you upload artwork and then launch a smart contract with us, that's put in IPFS. You're the owner of your own smart contract, so we don't operate through, some form of like centralized, to call it something, smart contract where we're managing a ton of collections and people are just minting individual tokens into that collection. So it is very much kind of like our end goal as a platform to keep things as decentralized as possible. But we also recognize that in order to provide, user experiences that are, great, and in order to onboard more and more users in Web3, you need to continue pushing the boundaries and exploring new ways of providing, innovative solutions to newcomers to the space. So absolutely agree with your points. But just trying to provide cool new experiences and also a community moment, which I think a lot of users have appreciated.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's a cool product for sure, and I think that there is something to be said for products that are, and I don't even mean this as a diss, but just products that are like good enough. Like you said, like there's no breach of data. Like everything that you guys pull from your APIs to say that this person was the minter, like I have no doubt that you're gonna be right about that 99.999% of the time. I think like especially in this space, I think we're kind of purists to a point in terms
Which
of
I love, by the way,
on-chain activities and stuff. But I think for most people, especially onboarding new people, yeah, I dig it. What's up, Middlemarch? I cut you off. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's an interesting question about when you think about like the shortcomings of signatures, in general. And so just a couple of things that come to my mind are that one, it really ties you to the website, right? You can't directly interact with the contract because you need to go to a website and have that website give you a token, basically. And so in order to, it's a conversation between you, a web server, and a contract. You can't go directly to the contract. And so, that mechanic is something. And then the other thing with the signature, I think more broadly, which is very interesting in relation to a transaction, is that a signature can never be undone, right? Once you say something and sign it, you've said it. That's it. It can't be undone. You can't later say, I'm going to write something else. I'm going to write a new letter that takes back the first letter. Because if you are in court and someone, shows you the first letter and they say, hey, is this your words? You can't just say, hey, well, there's another letter out there somewhere that says the opposite of this. You can't unsay something with a new signature. And so, for example, once this address, in the case of FairXYZ, and this probably won't happen, of course, once this address signs something that says this person minted this, if it discovers a mistake, it can't then withdraw that signature. Now, there are other ways to do that where you could have like a nonce on the server. So you could do a blockchain transaction, and there should be a nonce in the contract. You could do a blockchain transaction. You could do something like this in order to invalidate, but you cannot invalidate a signature with another signature, which I think is also very interesting. And this has some implications for some stuff surrounding lazy minting, which is also signature based, which I want to talk about as well.
Yeah, I think you're raising great points. I mean, like signatures themselves are, they come with their shortcomings. I think, as you said, for it can be cumbersome to be gated by a website instead of a smart contract. But again, I think it comes down to the fact that when you want to provide more and more bespoke experiences to the end user, you still, you need to rely kind of a bit on off-chain stuff in order to provide, a more optimal gas experience, for example, or being able to, provide more inputs into the function which can't be altered by the user. I think that there has to be also, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but I am also a believer in the fact that there has to be some degree of, creator ownership over their own smart contract. Granted, once a token ID is like an NFT is minted, then the owner is the owner. But up until that moment, the creator should retain ownership over what is being created and what is their own smart contract and what's being put out there on the blockchain, right? So like, if for example I'm an artist and let's assume you were talking about lazy minting, and I think that's actually a great example. Like, let's assume that I put 10 NFTs on my website, and they all, my smart contract is capped at 10 NFT supply, and I want that when a user mints a certain NFT from the website in itself, they're actually getting that metadata in the token URI. If you don't include a signature within that transaction, then the end user could simply go into the transaction in itself, modify the token URI, and then essentially harm the end result of your smart contract. So I think signatures are actually a very powerful way of giving creators real ownership over the artwork or the content that they're producing within their smart contract. So that's something that I really like, and I think good leverage of signatures within smart contracts is going to be a great way of enabling utility and new minting experiences to users, especially when considering the gas implications and how much lower it can be when you do this kind of stuff.
Definitely, and I think that lazy minting and I think OpenSea gets a lot of criticism, justifiably, for a lot of things about the way it does and its platform and everything. But like, when you think about the open minting thing they pioneered, you haven't really seen anything quite like it. And I just think it's really an incredible tool, even though it's not fully decentralized and all these kinds of things. But the idea behind lazy minting, right, is you can create an NFT, quote unquote create, right? It's not actually being created, but from your standpoint as a user, you're creating an NFT, but you don't have to pay any gas until it is sold, right? So you don't have the issue that has happened to me, and I'm not the only one I know, on Foundation, where you mint something and then it doesn't sell. And Dao Bao, shout out to Dao Bao, who collected something of mine recently. But a lot of times it doesn't sell, and you paid the price for this. And also, by the way, you can never delete it if it doesn't sell, if you're embarrassed about it and all this kind of stuff. But OpenSea came out with an idea that basically said, okay, you'll mint it, but you're not actually minting it. There's no blockchain transaction. What you're doing is signing a piece of data that basically says anyone can mint an NFT described by this data and attribute it to me in the future, right? And so now someone goes and they say, haha, OpenSea contract, I'm presenting you with this little letter that says this NFT is by this other person, mint this, attribute that minting to this other person, and now make me the owner of this. So why does this thing have to exist when it's just going to sit in the owner's wallet? Why can't it be minted directly to a collector? And so one reason for this is that you lose the provenance, right? Like, you don't actually know on chain when it was actually theoretically created. But there's another kind of also interesting fact about this, where you might forget, right? There's no storage component of the lazy minting. Like, you're on your own. It's not stored on the blockchain. The signatures are, you're on your own. It's in OpenSea's database. So if you as the artist forget what you've done, you forget the lazy mints that you've created, you forget what you've signed, there's no way then for you to take that stuff back. So someone could find it someday, and assuming the contract allows it, like maximum supply is not hit and all this kind of stuff, someone could find that thing that you're embarrassed about, that you think you deleted, you forgot about, and then mint it and have it be attributed to you like any other lazy mint concept. So, I think it's very interesting to be able to say, at the same level of security that the blockchain offers, that I said this, right? It's the same type of thing as a transaction, but you don't get the order, right? You don't get to be able to say, hey, I said this and then I canceled it here, or something like that with a signature. You just get to say truths. But I think the lazy minting experience, I think, is one thing that OpenSea has done just really, really well. And from the standpoint of a normal human being, I think it maps onto how NFTs work, which is you sell them. You don't just put them in your own wallet and watch them, So I'm a fan of that, and that's only possible with signatures.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. And just to jump in real quick, I think a lot of the potential issues with what you were mentioning, for example, the creator forgetting about the fact that they at some point, created that signature, can be solved if we improve smart contract standards as a whole, across the whole industry, or devs just adopt better practices, right? You could do things such as, for example, I don't know, like gating by nonce, or by block number or block timestamp. So maybe it's not you don't have that same provenance guarantee of like exactly when something was created, but at least you do have some certainty over which time period that thing was created. So, for example, you make signatures which as a nonce have, I don't know, like 1,000 block numbers ahead. Then at least you've got some degree of certainty that the provenance was within that time period. And again, these are all imperfect solutions, but with better smart contract practices and devs just paying a bit more attention to these kind of things, a lot of the issues, at least like 99% of them, can be solved, or at least that's my opinion.
Right. Yeah. And this is why I believe that OpenSea, whenever you make an offer, which is also signature based, by the way, when you make an offer or list something for sale, which is also signature based, OpenSea just says, what's the expiration date on this? Because they really want to push this idea of not having open-ended, bids and offers and asks, and all, not having like these open-ended financial transactions out there, just to really limit the chance that a year from now, 10 years from now, someone will accept an offer that you made today and do something you don't want to do. So these all have expirations, and then OpenSea also has the nonce thing you described, I think, where you can make a blockchain transaction to invalidate all your offers. But I'm not sure. I don't think lazy minting has like an expiration on OpenSea, and it would be sort of weird from a user standpoint if it did, because it's like, what do you mean expiration? This is my art. What are you talking about? But it should, and there's probably a way to delete all of your old mints as well. But yeah, and so this to me, just also jumping into the OpenSea offer thing, right? Like, this is also signature based. So if you are ever wonder how you are able to make an offer without paying gas on OpenSea, like you can bid on something, unlike marketplaces like Not Larva Labs or other contract-based, chain-based, on-chain marketplaces, it's because the thing that you are doing is not actually doing a blockchain transaction. It is you are signing a piece of data that says, hey, this is a coupon that you can bring and redeem for a blockchain transaction if you're on the other side. Like, this is an offer. You can go redeem this offer to the contract without any further input from me. But then, of course, the same issue, the offers themselves are written down who knows where, and you might lose track of them all. So, I think the signature thing is super important because it's the only way to get the good user experience. But then, how do you kind of square that with, when this abstraction breaks down? Like, for example, if you're trying to say like, no, this is really saying, who minted it guaranteed, or like in the OpenSea case, like the classic old listings bug where some OpenSea will remove something from its UI, but can never actually, or at least before, couldn't actually remove the signature-based offers. But I'm a fan of this, and I think just on a practical level, it's the most important kind of off-chain. And even you could do like an Oracle, right? That's another way of doing the who minted what thing, but still that's going to be driven by some signature, somewhere. So you can't escape the signature pill life that we all live now.
100%. And I think that there are solutions out there, like if you use like chain link solutions, for example, that kind of mitigate these problems. And by the way, like on the signature stuff, for any of the listeners that could be interested, this is actually the reason for why you can, for example, when you list something on OpenSea, decrease the price gas free, but then the moment that you want to increase it, you actually have to pay gas. That's because essentially you've created that signature, which, for example, says that you're selling an NFT at 0.5 ETH, and that signature is there, and it's kind of there forever until the expiration of your signature. So if you lower the price, that's fine, right? Because like if someone wants to go ahead and use your old signature and buy at the higher price, well, that's bad on them. But if you increase the price, well, you still generated that signature in the past, which lets someone buy at that lower price, and that's pretty much the reason for why you have to pay gas when you increase price, but not when you decrease price in OpenSea.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's a good point.
I've just Googled, and to teach everyone in this space something today, the study of truth is called alethology. So that's what we're doing here today. If you want to be fancy about it, we are talking about aletheology. I knew there had to be a word, so I Googled.
Nice.
That's something you learned today. Gold star for everyone here.
It was epistemology. That's the bigger one.
Well, yeah, epistemology is just the study of like knowledge itself.
So what is the difference between knowledge and truth?
That is a good question. On the Wikipedia page for aletheology, it says that it could be argued that aletheology is synonymous with epistemology, and that dividing the two is semantics. But I think there's a distinction to be made. You know, we're really talking about here, when we're talking about a Minter token, we're talking about blockchain verified truths. That's not the study of knowledge, but we're really studying what is the truth and who gets to decide the truth. I think it's like a more, you know, it's kind of semantics, but it's also like really hammering and like nailing down on like one specific aspect of information.
Well, there's also this question of like who was the first to discover something, like someone who had oxygen in a bottle from some random experiment, didn't know what it was. So like typically with knowledge, and I can tell like a sort of philosophy thing here, typically with knowledge, there's the sort of idea in the air of justification. Basically, you can't just be accidentally, you can't accidentally have the truth. You know, I randomly found out the truth and now I have knowledge. Like, no, you have to have a justification, but it's more complicated. So quick aside into like one of the only good things of philosophy, which is a thing called the Gettier case, which was basically this idea in philosophy that happened not so long ago, like 50 years ago, which was a challenge to a very ancient idea that was from like Plato's era, even more so before, which was basically that the relationship between knowledge and truth is that knowledge is justified true belief. So if you're going to know something, it has to be true. You can't know a false thing. You can't know something that you don't believe, right? You have to believe it, but then there's this justification angle where you have to be justified in forming that belief. You can't be accidentally right, you know, and so this was like this thing where for thousands of years, people thought that's what knowledge is, justified true belief. And this guy came along, Edmund Gettier, and he basically wrote this paper, like 2-page paper that like demolished this entire concept and made him like, you know, super famous. I think he just died recently. And the paper was called "Is Justified True Belief Knowledge?" And so he created these situations he called Gettier cases, or we call Gettier cases, where you had someone who has a justified true belief, and yet it is really counterintuitive to say that they have knowledge. So, you know, here's an example of a Gettier case. So, you know, you're standing on, you know, your porch and you live in the country and you're looking at a huge, you know, lawn, and you see like this black figure kind of moving. And, you know, you're like, oh, wow, I think that's a bear. So you form this belief that's a bear. It's justified because, you know, you've seen many, many, many bears in your life, and this is a black figure it's moving, so it's justified. But it turns out that the thing you are looking at isn't the bear, but there's actually a bear behind you. The thing you're looking at is like, say, a different animal, or it's a picture of a bear or something, right. Something like this. And so justified true belief, it's justified, it's true, but is it knowledge? Do you know that there is a bear? And you can, you know.
Yeah. I mean, this is my greater point. And Zach, before you joined the space, I was fudding the blockchain overall, because I think that folk truths are like more important than like computer veritable truths. And I think that's the thing, is like, you can't know, right? I mean, imagine if no one knows if it's a bear or not a bear. Does it matter? If everyone believes it was a bear, then it was a bear, regardless of if it was or not. So I've just added to my Twitter bio folk atheliologist, which I think is kind of funny. But I think that's true. You know, if everyone believes that something is true, then that makes it true until proven otherwise. And even sometimes then people won't believe you. So it's an interesting question to say, like, does the blockchain veritably say, is it cryptographically proven that such and such thing happened? If everyone believes that it's something else, or if there's a lot of evidence to the contrary, you know, or, you know, even if everyone just says something, I think that truth is just as valid as whatever the blockchain says is true.
Yeah, but I think there's a little bit of a weird thing here, which, you know, one thing you could say, which I really agree with, is if you look back at, for example, you know, the history of science and you see, okay, were people applying the scientific method? Were they really doing something like scientific, or were they just kind of doing whatever? Were they just kind of like taking this, believing that thing, discarding this thing, just like doing whatever? And so you can have this perspective that, well, there's actually no truly theoretical, like in the capital T way of looking at the history of science and watching the scientific method evolve and get better. It's more just a sociological type of exercise. Like, why do people say the things they do? Who's in the in group? Who's in the out group? Who doesn't have power? And so I think that is a very valid thing. I think that's basically true. There is no such thing as a scientific method that goes on through ages. It's a sociological question. And when people change their mind, it's more like religious conversion than persuasion in the history of science. But that does not change the fact that at a given time, everyone thinks that they are doing something. You know what I mean? Like, no one actually believes I'm just in a sociological landscape here. I don't know anything or care about anything, and you do too, or whatever. So
no, dude,
I just think
you live in a society.
When you look at it from the outside, you know, it all seems quite ridiculous. But when you're on the inside, you have to get out of the bed in the morning. You know, you can't just say, well, you know, what do my folk knowledge things tell me I'm going to do today? You have to have some, thing. But yeah, I agree.
This is the fun. This is the fun of the blockchain and having these discussions about, like I'm a purist and I think the Minter token is fake because it relies on off-chain. I mean, does it matter? Like, do we actually care if it's 100% on-chain or not? And the answer is no. Like, good enough truths are better than good enough. Good enough truths are true. You know what I mean? But they're fun discussions to have. We go down a semantics rabbit hole, but it's interesting.
But then you have Gucci punks, right? Sorry, quickly, you have Gucci punks, right? Minted on, it was actually good for me, sort of, but minted on the OpenSea shared contract, which was blockchain enough at the time, and then deleted from everywhere, basically. And so occasionally, the science thing, occasionally, but then it's like, can't get overly obsessed with it. Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
No, I was just going to say, like, truth is very much like a function of time, right? And I think this is like maybe a very an odd statement to make, right? But like, today we all call the color red, but then if tomorrow the whole world went colorblind, then we'd call it a different color, right? Things evolve with time, and I think that's what we've seen with science, as you guys were mentioning before. I think 500 years ago or 600 years ago, if you told the world, the people that the world is flat, then that would be truth, right? And very few people would be able to challenge that. The reality is that truth or reality is just absence of empirical evidence of the contrary, and that's really how we operate as humans, right? That's why most things in science are called theories, and they're not called certainties or absolute. Like, basically truth is just lack of empirical evidence of the contrary, and that's really how we as humans operate, right? Like, it's the same reason for why we think that $1 is worth $1, right? Like, especially considering that there's no gold backing. Like, why is that the case? Well, because we believe it, right? And there's no empirical truth to the other, otherwise, because if someone came to me tomorrow and said, hey, this dollar is actually worth $0, I'd say, okay, well, I'll buy it for you for free then, right? So that's really how we operate as humans in a society. I think we always have to come to consensus as to what we think is truth, or at least can be near enough to truth due to lack of empirical evidence to the otherwise.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned color blindness. It's like 500 years ago, people didn't even know color blindness existed, right? So it's like, if we all went colorblind is one thing, but like, what if there's a new type of color blindness we haven't even discovered? Like, people didn't even know that was possible, right? And then they discovered it. So it's not just about going into an existing category called color blindness. It's like, what new categories don't exist? But I would go even further and say that empirical facts have nothing to do with it. In other words, this is why scientific theories are never disproven. Every scientific theory has the ability to incorporate any empirical fact. You just put a fact in there. You adjust the theory to fit the facts. This is what everyone constantly does. And if you look at like the history of like Einstein versus Newton, like Einstein's theory, the story goes about like general relativity and disproving Newton. The story goes that there was this weird motion of the moon, of Mercury, and Einstein explained it and Newton didn't. So that was the empirical fact that proved Newton was wrong and Einstein was right. But of course, there were a zillion things that Newton's theory didn't explain. And a lot of times, Newton's theory went on to improve to explain them. They like discovered Uranus this way, like all kinds of things like this. So with an empirical fact that is counter to a theory, you just don't know whether the theory is going to eventually account for that. And so what you have to do as a believer in that theory is you have to try to incorporate that negative result. So there really just is no way any sufficiently like dominant scientific theory, there is really no way to disprove it. And so what you see is the adherents to the old theories never even change their mind. They just basically die. And so I think it's looking at the history of science is like a really, really, really dark exercise versus what you're taught in school. And yet I love rationality too. So it's like I'm
Yeah, it's fun.
I'm with it and against it. But the blockchain, it's a good one too.
I wanted to add some background, by the way. I'm sure that you came into this space. I mean, I think Middlemarch tweeted and like added your account, and so that's probably why you came in here. But just for context, Middlemarch, myself, and Piv are like an art collective, and we do all like fully on-chain art, and it's like everything that we've done is like a custom contract, like just for the specific project, and all of this sort of thing. So we're really nerds about this kind of stuff, and I think a lot of times we just like get on these spaces and go down semantics rabbit holes, but it's fun. We're like when we see projects like yours kind of sprout up, and it's like, oh, like this person's doing an interesting thing that's kind of in our wheelhouse. I don't know, it's cool to be able to talk to you and to get information and see other people in the space that are like thinking about these things, and kind of I don't know, it's just what we're like nerds about. But
yeah, I love it. This is an awesome spaces. I'm definitely gonna have to tune in a lot more. This is great, guys. It's really great.
So if anyone out there, we've been talking, and I love it, and Zach's into it. Dub likes it, I think. Anyone out there, reader topics, any reactions to what we're talking about? I know that Michael of Indelible Labs, amazing product. I'm basically sure that his contract uses Merkle proofs, not signatures. I've always kind of wondered about that. Maybe I can learn that later. But if anyone has used a signature or is interested in this kind of question, anyone, well, you can at any time say what's up. But what else is on the agenda here, Dub? What's the next?
We did the Michelin star thing. We did. Now we've done this. You had 3 points, didn't you? Did we? What's the third one? I forget.
I think it was this vault question, basically. Back to vault billing.
Yeah. It was tough to explain to Nuno about the vault because I don't know, like he spends a lot of time in the NFT space, but I don't think he thinks about it very deeply. And so we were kind of having to explain to him like what gas is. And he was like, why does this cost $400 to stake 103 NFTs in the vault? It's like, no, like it doesn't, it's not asking you for $400 to do that. It's just the Ethereum blockchain is asking you for $400 to transfer 103 NFTs at once.
Still, it's sticker shock. I think
right.
The gas thing. So what is a vault, basically? Actually, before I say this, I called out Michael. I put him on blast. He's a speaker now. Michael, set me straight.
Set you straight with what? The
why don't you use signatures versus the Merkle?
The Merkle. I'm using a Merkle tree for the allow list. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
Yeah. So, whenever you sign a transaction, that's verifiable enough in the transaction that you're the one that created it. So as long as you are on the Merkle tree, I don't really need a signature for that.
But why not just do signature? First of all, maybe you could even just explain to me, like, this is kind of embarrassing, but you've got to just admit when you don't know something. I kind of know what a Merkle tree is, but can you tell me what that is? And then why do you need a Merkle tree at all? I mean, my understanding is a signature, whatever a Merkle tree is, the signature is more flexible. So why don't you just do that approach, which would then be future-proof? But I don't know. What are your feelings?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I hadn't put a whole lot of thought to using signatures for an allow list, but the thing with that, I guess, would be it just would need it'd need like, I guess, my API or someone's API to validate the address that is on the allow list and then pass a signature along to the front end so that they can then mint with it, if I understand correctly, right? Whereas
Right. That's yeah.
whereas if
Go
you
ahead.
have a Merkle root, you can use that anywhere. You can use the Merkle root to mint from Etherscan. So we've had people use our Merkle roots to have minting done from their own websites also. And all that is needed is that Merkle root, and then the proof is I'm sorry, I'm talking about the Merkle proof. The Merkle root is stored on the contract, but you just have to pass in the Merkle proof along with your address, which is in the transaction. And then basically what happens is whenever you have a list of addresses, you can create a tree of different hashes that all link to the same root, which is the Merkle root. And I'm trying to think on the fly in detail on how this works, but basically, whenever you have a Merkle proof, it is saying that this address with this hash will result in a correct match with the Merkle root that is already on the contract. But I can link to a more detailed explanation on how that works.
No, I need the basic thing. So let me see if this is really good, though. So if I understand this correctly, right, basically there's some piece of data that's not so large that's stored on the contract. And
yeah,
then,
it's actually very small.
So it's efficient.
Yeah, it's I mean maybe 16 bytes. I would have to check, but I think it's maybe 16 bytes.
Okay, and so then that's stored in the contract, and then the user who wants to mint submits their address, right? That's message sender, and then they also submit a piece of data, another piece of data that has a that's the same for every single person or customized to them.
The Merkle proof is the same for everybody. I'm pretty sure. you think I would know off the top of my head since I made this, but it's been a long day.
Yeah, no, I mean, you think I would know since I'm talking about the alternate way to do it.
No, it is I'm pretty confident it is the same for everybody because you create basically the Merkle proof. Oh goodness. Let's see here. So you create the Merkle proof with the string of addresses or the array of addresses. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it is the same for everybody because otherwise it wouldn't really work with Etherscan just copying the Merkle proof from the front end. But
so then couldn't the Merkle proof be stored in the contract as well as the Merkle root if it's the same for everyone?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I need to I need to go confirm that. But that's a good question.
You're being put on the spot. This is your final exam.
I know.
You're gonna fail allow list 101.
I know, seriously.
But so the overall
it's been like what I think maybe a month since I last researched it.
Well, congrats on the success of Indelible Labs, by the way. I don't think we've talked together in a Spaces in a long time, but since then you've had like a ton of super successful stuff launch on there, and it's been really cool to see. So there's your flowers.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Sorry for failing the 101, but basically the mechanics of it, though, what makes it so efficient is the fact that you're storing such little data for a potentially like a list of thousands of addresses. You're storing just one little proof that that combined with an address will be able to be validated. So it's really nice. But yeah, basically the nice thing I liked about it over signatures, just to wrap it up, was the ability to just use it without needing a middleman like an API. But even then, it's like, well, you kind of need a middleman in that you need at least to know the proof to pass in. You need to know the initial list of all of the addresses so that the Merkle tree can be recreated, so that you can grab the proof for that address and then pass that into the smart contract. So there is some front end work that needs to be done, but I feel like it is more decentralized, and it is just a feeling. It feels more decentralized, just because it doesn't need necessarily our API. As long as you have your allow list saved, you could recreate the Merkle proof. And so whenever we're building stuff, we try to remove ourselves as much as we can from handcuffing ourselves to the creators, so that if we ever if I got hit by a bus or something, or AWS banned us or whatever have you, I mean you could keep operating.
So also, I think one other thing that's I think good about this, as you say, is that I gotta really learn how this works. But from your description of it, basically that when you have a signature, not only do you have to have a server, right, but you also have to have a private key in there somewhere, some piece of secret data that is being used to create this package of I'm on the allow list, and also this other person says that's true. And so, if you have a private key, where does that go? A config var on your server, that's a complicated thing, is managing private keys at any sort of reasonable scale. And so I think from your description, right, the Merkle tree is something that the quote unquote private key, the secret, is the private key of the person who is allowed to make the transaction to store it into the contract. So there's no kind of other private key being stored except for the private key that's being used to sign the transaction that stores the root, basically. So I think that's like another advantage here.
Yeah, exactly. It's and that's what I liked about it. Again, it just feels more decentralized in that. And correcting my statement earlier, it is unique per address, but it is otherwise, like you were saying before, kind of what's the point. But whenever a user enters in their list of addresses into our system, the nice thing is, using this, they could copy that same list, and that same list will always result in the same Merkle root. And then whenever you provide that with a specific address in the tree, it's always going to result in the same Merkle proof for that address that's in the Merkle tree. So it's nice. And it's also pretty low gas as well whenever it's being validated on the chain.
So anyone with the address list can validate that the root is the right root, and can generate each tree, each leaf, or whatever it is for each individual person.
Yeah,
okay, so you don't actually
the leaf
have to have any logic there.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But
the hat, yeah, it's like basically like the each leaf is like can lead to other leaves that lead to other leaves that lead to an address or something like that, and then you just follow that down to the proof, and it will be validated or not be validated.
Interesting. So let me ask you this question: basically, this is a tool for list inclusion, essentially. You can't do
Yeah,
other
exactly.
stuff with
That's
this.
what I was saying. It's it's for allow lists only. Hitting on what I can't remember his the guy's name from Fair, but was it Justin?
Zach.
Zach. I don't know why I said Justin. Anyways, um, Zach was talking about requiring signatures for their minting site. I mean, we've talked about doing something similar too, though it is again it is not as decentralized. It's whenever you have minting open to the public, bots can be a bitch. So we've had some bigger collections launch where they've been botted pretty bad, and we have there's only so much you can do on chain only that will help guard against that. You can limit it to where the signer of the transaction is the only one that can mint, but someone could spin up like 1,000 different wallets all signing different transactions and mint at the same time doing that. They'll all be different transactions, but people can find ways around botting. But if you are you know if you have full control over the front end, and the front end is the one delegate front end is communicating with the back end, creating signatures, then passing it back down, you can really limit who can mint by having different validations on the front end where bots wouldn't be able to pass the validation or things like that. So I think that there is some value there, kind of just talking about what was mentioned before. So
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, this is pretty. Oh, sorry. Is that okay if I jump in?
yeah, go ahead.
For sure, yeah, Michael, really appreciate your thoughts. I completely agree with everything you're saying, and just FYI, that's exactly the reason that we run signatures on our platform. Part of the technology that we provide to collections that launch with Fair is anti-bot technology. So the fact that if you have a very, very popular mint, as you correctly mentioned, what you usually see is they get botted, and then even if your signature gate, well, then you'll see is that people will essentially start using like Selenium or like different avenues to generate thousands of signatures across thousands of different wallet addresses, and even separate IPs. But the moment that you have that kind of communication between front end and back end, that's the way that you can prevent these bots from actually attacking your mint in a way. So like there's always like this trade-off between, as you said, like full decentralization and how much you want to rely on a server. I think mint token aside, like when you look at it from the perspective of mint, just a pure mint going through a smart contract in which the base URI is already defined and pretty much all the data is already there. The benefit of relying on signatures or Merkles is you essentially retain a bit more control over the mint, and the data that's going into the smart contract in itself is still and not to get into the debate of truth again and so on, but that is cryptographically okay, right? Like that's okay from the moment that it does hit the smart contract, and all you're doing by signature gating is just throttling essentially who are the users that can actually go into this, because ultimately, and maybe to talk a bit more about like kind of mainstream adoption, you do need to start introducing these features into minting experiences, because users aren't always going to be ready to face a gas war or like having to compete against bots and people that script in order to front run you in a mint.
But let me ask this question though. Like when the other day, I think I was using a faucet, like a Gurley ETH faucet. The POW faucet is really good. I was asked to basically distinguish cookies that look like dogs from cookies that look like cats. And it was actually pretty hard. And then I was asked to say which of these bottles is broken versus which is like just kind of twisted in an AI way, and I was like, oh my god, like this is way harder than the parking lights one.
The hardest one I had recently was which cat is an adult, and they were like a combination of all cats, but some were adult cats. Wow. I'm like, when does this kitten no longer an adolescent? I don't know.
You're a Tom now.
Yeah,
This
it's trying
cat
to
has
help
had
the
its bar
AIs in
mitzvah.
veterinary school. There's also Which Dogs Are Smiling. That one was good. But are we headed towards a world, right? Like there's a pretty clear Web 2 thing about this, which is which dogs are smiling and look like cookies. Is that the future for, Indelible Labs or Fair, where you go, you just see the straight on, trying to, sign up for Gmail or whatever it is type of thing to Mint?
So, well, I mean, for us, we plan on making it optional whenever we add that in, just because I don't like again, everything that we do, we try to be as we don't want to handcuff ourselves to you. So if you want to be handcuffed to our APIs and stuff, then that's on you. But I wouldn't want to force it. So we'll have it as an option for people who are expecting like a big, release, where if they opened it up, it'd be like minted out in like 2 minutes. That like happened. And so it's, you don't want that. And if you're expecting that big of a launch, then you probably should lock it under signatures. But we have others where they do full allow list mint outs, and that also prevents bots. It takes a little bit longer, but it depends on what the user wants, but we will make it optional.
At what point is this all like too complicated? Like if you're like an artist and you're like, I want to do something, like I think doing it on chain is cool. Like I want to release something. It's like a lot to stomach, I think. Like I think as an artist in the space, I'm okay with Solidity. I've spun up an ER721A contract by myself by like patching together code or whatever, but it wasn't very good. I think if I didn't have developers and if I didn't have Middlemarch like developing for me, I think I would have just quit by now. Like I don't think I would be doing NFT art anymore because there's like a lot, right? Like why does it have to be so complicated?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the
like how
point.
far away are we from
that's the beauty of what Michael and Indelible Labs and what Fair XYZ is doing, right? That
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Right, like that you don't need to worry about that. Like I guess it's like similar to being a video content creator like in the early 2000s. Like imagine that if you wanted to upload media onto the internet, you'd have to let's assume that there was no YouTube and no website for you to upload media. You'd have to hire a team of developers that would create a website for you where essentially you'd have to upload your media and like put in the, kind of all the metadata, etc. Like that would be a very cumbersome process. But then along come platforms such as YouTube, and they essentially facilitate it for you, so that the only role you have as an artist or a content creator is the upload process and doing everything else yourself. Doing everything else as a platform. And I think this is very much like what Michael was referring to, and this is also kind of what we do ourselves at Fair, right? Which is if a creator comes to us and they want to launch an NFT collection, we support like generative art and all this stuff. So they can just upload their trades. They can, spin out a generative art collection. They hit a single button, which decentralizes their artwork on IPFS and then deploys their own smart contract. But then all the anti-gas or anti-bot technology that we provide is under the hood, and they're not even aware of it. So we don't provide like captures. It's more like under the hood, like just checking for IP addresses, like just very usual botting measures. But I think, this is like, and I don't think everything about Web 2 is necessarily very good or very bad. But these experiences do exist in Web 2, and users don't find friction in them because it's all under the hood. And that's why there is value to having a very solid backend behind a Web3 project, right? Because there are certain things that you just don't want your users bothering with, because that amount of friction. I mean, we live in a world right now where people don't want friction in their experiences, right? Like people now do like single sign-ons or like Google sign-ons because they don't want users creating an account. It just takes too long, and like the friction to that purchase is, they want to reduce it as much as possible. When you want to stay completely true to everything that's happening in Web3, you also need to understand that there's a small compromise in how much user friction you're providing, and consequently how difficult you're making the onboarding of users. Because at its core, the technology is fantastic, but it's also complicated and it's very difficult to take on. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Michael, on what I just said.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with the concept of removing as much friction as possible. It's tight rope to walk.
Right.
Just because I think like in Web 2 it's like I come I mean I think most of us come from Web 2, since that was where we were
It was life.
before this.
Yeah.
But coming from Web 2, that was kind of like, that is the mantra: remove as much friction as possible. Whereas I feel like now it's like, it's at least it's hard for me to decide sometimes where, should I be removing, should I just be doing this automatically and removing the friction for the people using our system, or like, again, going back to what I was saying before, make make things where there's a way out if they want, so that they're not connected to us. But every time you add these kinds of options to a system, going back to what you were saying, it's friction. So, and that's like a big no-no in Web 2, right? And so it's hard. So I definitely see where you're going at. And I think that, it kind of makes me, think about, the whole Apple and Android dynamic, where, I actually hate categorizing myself as the Android side on this, because I'm a huge Apple fanboy. But I feel like I've been taking the more Android approach, and maybe that's bad, maybe that's good. I don't know. I've been kind of just doing it, taking like one scenario at a time. We're kind of learning as we go. But yeah, I think the biggest thing though for me is that, we aren't backed by any VCs. We don't have millions in funding. It's just Rob and I, kind of bootstrapping the software. And so I think that also might be a big factor in why we make things so loosely connected to our system, is because we don't want to, promise that I mean, trust me, I want to be around a year from now and be, one of the biggest players in the game a year from now, 2 years from now. I want to be, one of the go-to places for a release. But you can't guarantee, right? And so, to our users' advantage, I always leave things loosely connected. But
Yeah, we should talk more. I guess for context of my comment about it being complicated, like I'm an artist in this space, and recently I have been doing UX and UI for minting pages. So I'm not a programmer or like a developer, but I'm designing the experience that the user will have to go through in order to sell their art. And this has, this has revealed itself to be much more complicated than I ever thought it would be. When you try to upload a video to YouTube, I've been comparing, what's the upload process for Instagram, what's the upload process for YouTube, or for, like to sell something on eBay, like how much information do you have to fill out? There's a cumbersome amount of options that I have to give to the user just to get a token uploaded and listed for sale. Never mind all the, this is a bot protection. We're using Merkle trees for allow list. We're using this. Even beyond that, there's just like a lot of things that you have to ask. And I think that the UX and UI thing is like a big aspect of it, because most current Web3 websites, in my opinion, have like very bad UX. That makes it very confusing. So I'm right now, I'm kind of like brainstorming and trying to figure out what's the best way that I can get a user to upload a token, like you said, like frictionlessly, and not have to ask them a million questions. And I
don't think you have to use technical terms.
No, definitely not.
Obviously, not. But yeah. It's definitely, it's a fine line, right? You want to, provide information, but you also want to limit friction. What is Zach? What is your what's your methodology to walking that line? Is it more? Do you lean more remove friction?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, removing friction is kind of like, I think, a number one priority when one tries to think about how do you onboard the next. I think this is like the most said sentence that I've heard over the last couple of months. But like, how do you onboard the next billion users, right? And the key to that is friction, because people are used to a Web2 experience, and I think it's unrealistic to expect users to adopt a brand new technology with a lot of friction in between. That's usually if you see kind of like innovation curves and the way that technology adoption goes, you always have kind of the early adopters, then you have kind of like a few more people that are a bit more curious, then you have mainstream adoption and the late arrivals. But to hit that mainstream adoption, which is kind of the center of the curve, which is where the vast majority of users come from, you need very little user friction. And this is like we talk about this being like a very Web2 experience, but it's actually just driven by human psychology, right? Like, it's not this is frictionless because it's Web2. It's more like this is frictionless because humans like frictionless experiences, and thus Web2 adopts it, and probably Web3 will end up adopting it too. I think you Dovetail, you were making some great comments on the fact that like it's just extremely painful to launch your own smart contract, etc. But going back to what Michael was saying, like you don't necessarily need to make the process technical, and even if you remove terms and remove wording, you can also do a lot of the work under the hood for the user themselves, right? Like, for example, if you see that an artist is, I don't know, uploading one-of-one art, and they're not interested in additions, then you can also automatically understand that they probably want an ERC 721 and not an ERC 1155, right? So you can infer that straight away, and then pretty much make that decision for the user, because there's no reason for why they'd prefer one smart contract above the other.
Right.
Now, granted, this provides a bit less flexibility when it comes to launching a collection, because some decisions are made for you. But the reality is that if that decision is correct for 99.9% of users, and it makes the process 10 times more frictionless, then it's probably a good compromise to have. And I think this goes back to kind of like our previous discussion on truth, which is like certain things don't need to be 100% certain. They don't have to be 100% flexible. If you can reach much higher conversion and much less friction by getting 99% of the way there, that's actually good enough, and that's probably better for the end user. So yeah, that trade-off is obviously a very, very tricky thing to balance on a daily basis.
Yeah, I've been tempted in designing UXs to add an advanced user option before you get to kind of all the basic questions that you're going to have to answer. And I don't know if that is a good solution, but I think that it could be helpful to some users to open it up and say, like, okay, like if you know what you're doing here, we can let you look underneath the hood, so to speak. And then just have a very streamlined, oh, you want an open edition, so I'm not even going to explain to you what an 1155 is. I'm just going to give you an 1155. Real quick, Middlemarch Rugged, and he's in our group DM, saying that he can read the closed captions of what we're saying, but he cannot hear us, and I don't think that he can speak either. So I don't know what a good course of action is here, but that is the situation we're in. I think if he leaves the space, it'll rug us all and cause the space to end.
Yeah, if the host leaves, it gives like, I think, a minute before it'll auto close.
Oh, so if he does it in under a minute, we can keep this space open?
No, so what I like, if he just leaves.
Did we rug? Is this?
I think it's no. I can. Middlemarch texted me saying, messaged me saying, I'm rugged anyway.
Okay. Well,
Guys, it's a bit late here, so I'm gonna go. But it's been an absolute pleasure, being in this conversation with you guys. Really, some incredible thoughts. Really appreciate it. Michael, great to hear also from another kind of NFT no code solution founder. I'd love to stay in touch. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone for your time and your thoughts.
Same here.
Thanks for coming by. I appreciate you having that. What am I trying to say? Appreciate you being on the space.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good evening.
Peace.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Okay, well, it's been 2 hours, so this is probably a good time to wrap it before Middlemarch needs to rug us all. But thank you for listening to the final episode of Capsule 21 Weekly number 7, the first episode of our podcast. And we will talk to you all very, very soon. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Peace.